420. So for all you that celebrate that, I don't, but happy 420. I don't partake, but I didn't even realize that it was that date. All right, cool. We're good now. So to start off, I have a PowerPoint here. I'm gonna give you guys a sheet that goes along with this. Is there any on the table? Because that means I have a couple left. I know I printed up enough for everybody that, but it would look like this. Yeah. That's it. Pass those around, please. Thank you. So we're going to talk about loosely a book by John Maxwell called The 15 Invaluable Laws of Growth. Now, when I decided on this topic in this book specifically, I realized quickly that there's so much content in the book. Every chapter has a ton of content, and there's no way that we're going to be able to get through the book, the 15 laws of value the 15 invaluable laws of growth. So I said, okay, let's pick out the best two. I skipped there for a second. That was rough. The guys that are you good? You don't have any? Nope. How many do you need? How many more do we need? Me and him. All right. So,
I think you sent the original copy.
I did.
Yeah. The changes that we made on here.
Oh, that's okay. At least they weren't like severe changes. I didn't know. Okay, can you?
I need here. I've got my laptop.
All right, cool. All right, perfect. Sounds good. Instead of us printing them out again or whatever. All right, so before we dive into this, guys, the first thing I wanted to go through that didn't have to do with this book was, or it has to do with the book, but it wasn't in the book, is building character. All right, and how character develops. And so the first slide, admittedly, is depressing. Okay, in a way. Now, before I go through it, or as I go through it, there is a point to this, okay? Because it's very depressing. The first thing that you see here is 8 out of 10 heroin addicts that are in recovery will relapse, right? So I've been an addict for years. I was in active addiction until 8 years ago. Okay, so until 8 years ago, I was addicted to opiates, and by the time I quit, when I first started, it started like most people do. I had an injury. Well, I mean, I had an injury that's what propelled it, but I had done opiates before that. I was heavily involved in drugs already, and that just sort of got me to focus on that one thing, I guess is the best way to put it. And I remember the day that I realized I was an addict was the day that I woke up feeling sick, and I'm like, oh man, I have the flu. And then I took a Percocet and it felt better. I was like, okay, I have a problem now. Like it took me years to realize it, a couple of years to realize it. The reality is that these are people that are in recovery, right? So out of the people that are in recovery, well, I guess to relapse, you have to be in recovery, but out of the people that are in recovery, 80% of them will continue to use, right? And a certain percentage of those people will overdose, and a certain percentage of those people will pass away. How many people have known somebody that's a heroin addict? Okay, a lot of people. How many people know somebody that's died from it? A lot of people, right? From all different walks of life, right? Some, it might be a relative that you know, might be a friend. Some people know somebody that's in their 50s that's died of an overdose. Some people know people that are in, they're probably their early teens that died of an overdose. It's gripping America, right? It's a significant problem here, right? Now, from recovery, I'm pretty active in recovery still. And when I go to these meetings and we see a new person walk in, it sucks. It sucks to know that there's an 80% chance that person won't be there in a month or 6 months or a year, right? It sucks to know that. And that a certain percentage of them are going to pass away. You get used to it over time, but you have to have a certain amount of what is it? Cognitive dissonance, where you're like, I'm going to put this out of my mind or whatever, because, and I'm going to pretend like everything's like positive. This person's definitely going to make it and stuff like that. You have to, right? It's a negative problem. It's a negative character trait that shapes a lot of lives. 27% of college graduates will find jobs in their field, between 75% of college graduates won't find jobs in their field. It means that 75% of the people that go and pay $20,000, $40,000, $100,000, $200,000 for school are not going to get jobs in their field, and are probably not going to make more money than they thought they would make, right? They're probably going to make less money than they thought they would make. This is a staggering. Only 4% of people that are born into poverty will grow from that poverty. 4% of people. That's difficult. 4% of people. That's not a lot of people. 1 in 4 Americans are diagnosed with mental illness in any given year. 66% of American adults are on prescription medication, and 74% of American adults are overweight. There's a lot of stuff that negatively impacts us, right? And there's a reason for this. Again, and finding this too. Again, I know this is depressing stuff, and I try to find some counterbalancing stuff. And I'll be honest, I found some stuff, but not a ton. You know what I'm saying? There was some stuff, but there was the good did not outweigh the bad, and that was my intention, was to find that. I'll have to admit that was my intention, was to find the good that outweighed the bad. And I found a couple positive things. I do want to point them out. 40% of adults lived in poverty in 1968. Today, only 11.4% of adults do. That's a significant decrease in poverty. Right? There are 32 million small businesses in the U.S. now, right? Getting more every year. With basic changes to diet and exercise, the average person can lose up to 8 pounds per month. So that's good, you know. There are over 4 million open skilled trade jobs available in the U.S., and the average skilled trade worker makes $57,000 per year. That's, you know, almost 3 times what the poverty limit or the poverty rate is, right? Poverty limit rather. I think the poverty line it's too low probably, but it's like 21 to 23,000 or something like that. So it's all about how you look at things, right? I mean, no doubt there's a lot of negative things, but there's things that we can do to fix those things. And a lot of those things are built into our character, right? Our character is built off our experiences and what we go through. So the first thing that you see on your page that you were given is something that looks kind of like this, right? And the question that I've been asking all day is, what's built you, right? So there's a lot of different experiences and things that build us as people. You know, and then we take more control, I'd say, as an adult. A lot of people take control as an adult of their experiences and how they grow. But these things are what shape us, right? And there's other things that could be on that list. What I ask you to do is, as we go through these things, circle the things that most influence you. So I'll give you a story, right? So when I was 10 years old, when I was 8 years old, I found out that my father had cheated on my mother, which as an 8-year-old, I didn't understand what that meant, right? But I know that he left. I guess I was 9. He left for the first time. And he left for like 6 months or so, and then he came back, and then I caught him cheating on my mother. And then he left again, and I didn't see him for another 8 years, right? 6 months after he left, so I was roughly 11, a little bit before 11, was the first time I used cocaine, right? And after that, I was off to the races. It didn't get easier after that. I was around a lot of friends, and those friends influenced me. My friends were a lot older, and I could get whatever I wanted at a young age. So at 12 years old, it didn't matter what I wanted. I could get, if I wanted to use dope, or if I wanted to use ecstasy, or if I wanted to use whatever I wanted, I could get, was available to me. And that's when my friends really started shaping my my life, right? So to start off, my family never really shaped my life. My friends are the ones that really made me, when I turned into an adult, my friends are what made me an adult. They're what shaped that character that I was when I was, let's say, 20 years old, 18 years old, 19 years old, right? And my decisions did as well, right? So at 18 years old, really 17 years old, I hadn't turned quite 18 yet. I got into a fight with a kid on the train tracks and beat him up pretty bad. And his father ended up being a police officer. I ended up getting arrested for it and charged with a bunch of different felonies. And then my mother had enough. My mother was an alcoholic, but she's also a teacher. My father was an electrician, you know, when he left. And that's the thing I think that was so difficult for me, was when I was a kid, when I was, you know, before I turned 8, 9 years old, everything was good. You know, we went to Disney one time. We'd go on like a vacation every year, right? We were living a normal middle-class life. And then when my father left, my mother was working at a liquor store as an alcoholic and going to school, right? And so things started changing and my life started changing and whatnot. And I found it difficult to cope with. So by the time I got arrested, my mother's like, I'm not bailing you out. So 19 months later, I was able to get out. But it did change my life. At that point, my decisions started shaping who I was, right? Started building my character. And I had to feel like, I felt like I had to fit into a certain mold. So what I want you guys to do quick is circle the things that apply to you, that most shape you, right? When it comes to building your character. Was it genetics? Now, what does that mean? Well, for example, if someone is born with Down syndrome, they're going to have a different life than, like, you can't put pressure on a person that has Down syndrome. Most people that have Down syndrome to go out there and, you know, get a normal job and just operate completely normal, right? Like that's something that's genetic, that's going to impact somebody, right? If somebody's born without arms or something like that, there's going to be certain said, they're going to find way more difficult to do than other people, right? Upbringing. So, that could mean a lot of different things, obviously. And that could sort of be family too. But I think they are two different things, right? The way your upbringing, if let's say I grew up in, so whenever my mother moved, right, we moved to this project called Lakeside in Worcester, the city that I'm from. And that I'd say shaped my upbringing at that point, right? We could no longer just like go outside to the park, right? It was more dangerous outside. We had to like go home, go inside the house. There was nothing we could really do. Or inside the apartment, there's nothing we could really do. Childhood experiences, trauma, education can change you, can adapt your character, community can change you. When I say focuses, what that means is like, picture there was that kid that played football years ago that his father trained him from a young age to be a quarterback. And that's what he was going to be. And he trained him. I forget the guy's name, Todd or Tom something. He was drafted, ended up grappling with addiction as well. And I think he eventually won that battle. But that's what I mean by focuses, like family focuses, friends, family, decisions, and then religious groups or other groups, right? So there's, groups out there that could be positive or that could be negative, right? Like I try to raise my kids now with a couple influences, with of course family being an influencer, positive decision making, and I want my church involved in how I raise my kids too, right? So for me personally, that's what I try to do now. I didn't have any of that. What I had was friends, poor decisions, probably bad genetics too, but I had a couple of those things there. So circle the things that most apply to you. You'll see here next, there's a couple of questions. So with your character as it currently is, right? So a lot of these things have shaped you to who you are right now. And some people might be happy with where they're at. Some people might not be happy with where they're at, right? I think self-development is always an important thing. You should never stay stagnant. And, when I was looking this stuff up, what really struck me as interesting was the amount of people, most doctors, most articles I could find by different people said that you cannot change your character, that you are who you are, okay? And that was troubling to me. I don't subscribe to that. I don't believe that. I don't care what doctors say about that. I really don't. Certain people, sure, right? I interviewed serial killers for 3 years, right? So I think it's a little bit too late when you get to that point, right? Like there's nothing you can really do, right? You're not going to go back and you can do the best with what you have, I guess, but you're not going to be able to change what you did in a situation like that. Your character's sort of been figured out. You figured out for yourself already, made some bad decisions. And but for most people, there's not too many things in the world that you can do that you can't come back from, right? There's definitely some things, but there's not a lot of things. Most things you can change and adapt, right? And it was troubling to see how many people think that. Now, admittedly, most of the things that came up when I looked up, can you change your character or character change it was like, your man will know. It's like your man will never change or whatever. Like if my wife looks through my computer right now, she's gonna be like, what the hell is your man will never change. Your man will always be a cheater. She's gonna be like, what the hell's wrong with him? I didn't know this side of him. So admittedly, a lot of it was that stuff. I had to sift through that. But a lot of people thought you could not change. And so my question for you is, if you were offered whatever opportunities is next for you, for everybody that's different, some people that might be a promotion, for other people that might be doing better in their job, for other people that might be retirement, right? That might be building a business, okay? But for whatever is next for you, do you feel like your character is geared towards growth for that? So answer that question now, and then answer it again at the end of this conversation after we go through this stuff. And then the question is, what improvements can you make today to develop personal growth? Hold off on that question. Hold off on that question until we're done going through the rest of this stuff. So the first law that's in the book, now this book again, okay, the 15 Invaluable Laws of Growth. Linda has offered to, if anybody goes and buys this book and turns in a receipt for it, which is like $15, you probably get it for less on Amazon. But if you want to go buy it and turn in a receipt for it, then you can get paid back for buying that book, okay? So Linda has offered that as well. The first law of growth that we're going to go through is the law of intentionality, okay? The law of intentionality. Now, the first thing that you see when looking at that law is this thing called the growth gap, okay? Now, I want you guys to think about, it could be your first job, it could be you right now, it could be any experience that you've had. It could be in sports, it could be in work, most likely in work. But we're going to think about these different gaps as we go through them, okay? These different assumptions, all right? How many people, by a show of hands, and dig deep, again, it doesn't need to be this job, it's not mean that you're admitting to this now, but thought when they joined a job that they would grow automatically over time. Natural progression, right? Okay. A lot of people. How many people have thought, I don't know how to grow. I don't know what to do to grow when they're in a job. Okay. How many people have thought like they need to wait for the right time? Like eventually I'll grow, but I really need to wait for myself to be ready. Okay. A couple people. I'm scared to make mistakes. Okay. So a couple people think that or have thought that. I need a perfect plan. So I'll grow eventually, but I need to plan everything out perfectly. If I don't, then I'll fail. Okay. So a couple people. I don't feel motivated. I don't feel good. I don't feel motivated. Okay. I'm not as worthy as others. There's other people that should be before me in that list. Okay. All right. So a couple people there. And then I thought this would be easier. Like I thought growth would be easier. I thought the job would be easier. Right. People suffer through this a lot. And I think in our department, when it comes to going into management, when you're on a team and you look at what your team lead does, it's very easy to go, oh, well, like what? They take the team out, they drive us out there, they work with us a little bit, whatever, right? Same thing with events and call center. I think a lot of people like think that this job is a lot easier than it is. And they jump into it and they realize that all of the responsibility that comes with that job also exists there too, right? It's not just the job that you need to take care of, right? So bridging the gap is important. I'll tell you the first thing that I look for in somebody for growth is the law of it is growth is intentional. That's the first thing I look for when somebody wants to grow. Now, what does that mean, right? I'll give you an example. We had a guy that worked here before, and he worked here before COVID. Okay, so he worked here before COVID. So he was in the canvassing department before COVID. After COVID started, we started doing event stuff. Okay, we started doing event stuff, and it was a difficult transition for a lot of us. We had never done it before. It wasn't the easiest thing in the world, but we didn't really have an active events department here in this territory, and so we sort of took over that role after doing some call center stuff too. So when this person was hired, right, they had always wanted to go into sales. That was their thing. They wanted to go into sales, but they didn't have a driver's license. And so because they had made some mistakes before, and so they couldn't get a driver's license at the time. That's fine. We worked with the person and whatnot. So even when we were doing events, we were very understanding of that situation, right? Myself, Andrew, we're like, look, we'll put you closer to events. We'll put you at it only when you can work, right? This person had just had a kid, one or two, so we're like, you tell us when you can get rides to events, and we'll set you up just for those events. That way he could keep working, keep his job, but also have the time to himself and not have to kind of like make things difficult on himself, right? So that went well for a very brief period of time, but it wasn't working out. The numbers weren't working out. We still let it ride because we're like, look, this isn't the job this guy was hired to do. So we understand that a little bit, right? Then I sent him to an event and I sent Andrew to the same event. I told Andrew to leave at 5, him to leave at 7. Andrew left at 5. I got a call from the person putting on the event on Monday, and they said, hey, your guy left at 5:30. You didn't have anybody there from 5:30 to 7, right? I'm like, what the fuck, right? So I warned the guy. I'm like, listen, this is not, you can't do this, okay? It should be pretty understandable. The next week, I assigned him to an event at a pet food place. We were doing donations, okay? You guys are trying to figure out who it is? Yeah, okay. Yeah, you guys know it. Yeah, I'm not gonna say any names, but you guys know who it is. They were yes, I get it. So so I put him at this pet food place, right? And I put him there. The next week I sent him back there again. Okay. And they kick him out right away. As soon as he gets there, like, no, you need to leave. So I call the people and they say, well, yeah, last time he was here a week ago, he showed up, set up the table, left for 2 hours, came back, left for another hour, and then came back again. So all of our employees had to deal with all the work that he was supposed to do, that they were supposed to do as two of them. So then I had to let the person go. And he said to me, he goes, I said, dude, you were set up for success. Like all you needed to do is you're getting a license in January. It's September. All you needed to do is maintain a basic work schedule, like 3 days a week for that. That's it. That's all you needed to do to be where you wanted to be. What's wrong with you? Why couldn't you do that? He said, well, I was going to eventually start to do that. Right? Growth is intentional, 100% intentional. And so when you go into a job or whatever, you can't assume that that job's just going to forget about, or anybody, a relationship too, that person's going to forget about 3 years of bullshit if you do things right for 3 months, right? You can't assume that. And a lot of people do assume that when they go into jobs. Like growth is automatic. Eventually they're going to need somebody for that role, and I'll just kind of step into that role, and that's the way that it works. And that's not the way that it works. Right? The second one, I don't know how to grow. That's not an employee to learn how to grow as long as the resources are provided. That's the big caveat there. If the resources aren't provided, then obviously an employee can only do so much. But at least in our department, I can speak for ourselves, for our department, that the resources are always provided for people in this job. If somebody asks for something and they ask for some sort of knowledge, then they're going to get that information, right? If it takes time, if it takes whatever, we will do whatever it takes to get that person that information. If it takes bringing them from a different office down to here for a couple of days, if it takes sending somebody up to their office, whatever it takes, we'll get them that information. And I like to think most departments here are the same way. I just can't speak for other departments. That being said, what I would say to you is if you don't feel like you have that, okay, then you need to talk to your manager about that. You really need to talk to your manager about that because that's an important thing for your job is that you have the ability to learn how to grow. Right? If I ever go into an interview with somebody, I'll tell you a story. I was going to leave this company at one point a couple of years back. Okay. Not because of any reason, except I was getting a lot of pressure from my family to move back up north. And so I talked to the guy who ran the renewable energy office up in Maine. And I sent him a list of questions because this guy, like, it resorted just to email back and forth. He was a pain in the ass. But I asked him questions like, where do you see your business going in 5 years? You know, what are your, in the next 5 years, where would you like your business to go? Stuff like that. Okay. Where do you see this department going in the next 5 years? Stuff like that. Right. And he sends me an email back and was like, you shouldn't need to know this information. What? Are you out of your mind? That's crazy. Right. So obviously I was like, yeah, okay. And I think this grass is not always greener situation. I've done that numerous times in my career. I usually make the right decision. That's definitely one of those times where I'm like, that dodged the bullet for sure. They eventually sold the company to one of my buddies, actually. They had no growth plan. That's what it came down to. We'll grow by a little bit, you know, each year. I mean, it's crazy. I would never work for a company that didn't have a growth plan. Okay. But part of that plan is knowing how to grow. The right time thing. Look, I understand. I would never want to put you're setting somebody up for failure when you move them into a role that they're not ready for. And that's not fair. That's not fair to do to somebody. You want to try to stay away from that. Even if you end up pissing the person off. If someone says to you, like, look, you're doing things right, you're learning, but you need a little bit more time. It's not the right role for you yet. As long as their intention is right, it's not a bad thing. Right? It's really not a bad thing. It's not a bad thing to hear. The biggest thing with that is that if you put somebody in a role, let's say that I take somebody and I put them in a management role and they're not ready for it. Not only are they screwing up their own career, they're screwing up other people's careers too. That's people's livelihoods. That's whether or not somebody else can feed their children. You know what I'm saying? And so it's not a fair thing to do. In management, you have to always make the right decision with that. That being said, make the right time out to gain the information to grow, right? You can't just put off learning, right? That's not going to make you grow. Expect and learn from your mistakes. I have a friend that just opened up a restaurant. I don't know if all the groups are sort of like blending together now. So if I already mentioned this, and I apologize, like 30 seconds ago, I don't think I did, but he just opened a restaurant over in Connecticut, right? Has anybody ever heard of Putnam, Connecticut? Pat was talking about it in the canvassing department yesterday. Okay, so Putnam, Connecticut was this small town that had a drastic drug problem just a couple of years ago, and they redid the entire town. And now it's this great town in Connecticut where you can walk around. There's restaurants everywhere, whatever. And this guy who I know, he opened up this restaurant in Putnam, Connecticut. It's an Irish restaurant, like an authentic Irish restaurant. I think Irish food is gross, to be honest with you, but the burger was good. I had a burger. I enjoyed it. It was a good place. If you have a chance to go there, it's a good place. I don't know why you'd be in Putnam, Connecticut, but if you find yourself there, it's called the Hare and the House. So he pays me to say that. That's what I know. No, but I was talking to him the other day, and they opened 3 days before COVID hit, right? And so I said, that must be really, really difficult for you. Right? But here's what he said. This is the surprising thing he said, yeah, it was difficult. I was scared. I was going to lose everything. And this guy's 37 years old, dumped in his entire life savings into this. He goes, I was scared I was going to lose everything. But what I realized quickly is that I would not have been able to handle 100% capacity. So thank God I had to start at 50% capacity. Right? What a good way to look at, right? What a good way to look at. I mean, to think that he was able to build his business up from that 50%. Now, Connecticut had really tough laws too when it comes to it wasn't mid Pennsylvania. I mean, it was tough here. Up there, they couldn't do anything for a long time, And so, but what a way to look at it. He just got a job at Pub 99, this restaurant chain up there, washing dishes 2 days a week. So he works every day. He has a laundromat that he owns. And then which is relatively self-sustaining. He has a restaurant that he works at all the time. And 2 days a week, he goes to Pub 99 and he works there as a dishwasher because he wanted more information on how to run his business. And he figured that's a successful business chain. I might as well go get a job doing that, right? So talk about taking advantage of your opportunities. It's not about the money. He's making not much money working there, obviously, but it's about the opportunity to be able to learn, right? And that was the greatest example I could think of there when it comes to learning from your mistakes. The perfect plan gap, like you're not always going to have a perfect plan. That's the way it is. The feeling motivated, unless you have a deeper issue there, sometimes you just have to act and let the motivation happen after. When it comes to being as worthy as others, I think that a lot of times, guys, that's a cop-out for a lot of people. I'm not saying that it is for everybody, but for a lot of people, it is, right? It's a way of blaming other people. That's what it is. It's a way of, well, I'm not as good as you people, will get as good as you. The information is available to everybody. I'm definitely someone that thinks that, barring physical, like I'll put it this way: in these jobs that we do, you can repeat what somebody else is doing. You can make yourself better in these jobs. If I've been here long enough to know that when I started with the company 12 years ago, I was terrible at the job. I wanted nothing to do with it. There was nothing that I wanted to do the job at all. I hated dealing with people. I had no interest in it whatsoever. The guy who hired me, again, another story I've repeated over and over again. So I think did I tell you guys the story about how I got hired here? I did? No? Okay. But what about it here today, right now? No? Okay. All right. Sounds good. So the guy who hired me, and I'm going to go over him as a mentor later. When he hired me, I had gotten into an altercation, and I was almost paralyzed from the neck down. I was in the hospital, and I met this guy. His name's Wayne Grimo. Okay, got it. All right, I'll talk to you. His name's Wayne Grimo. So he was in the hospital because his daughter was having a baby, right? And so I'm in the hospital, and I'm all like tweaked out on drugs. I think I had taken a bunch of ecstasy. I had a wound in the back of my neck that was a millimeter away from paralyzing me from the neck down. And I'm sitting there laying down in this waiting room, essentially, and he's in the wrong waiting room. His daughter's having that baby, like I said. And he offers me, he's talking to me, whatever. And he's like, look, I'll give you a job. I'll give you a place to stay. I'll give you a chance. I'll give you an opportunity, right? So I got out of the hospital. I called him like a week later, and then he gave me the chance to go work for him at Renewal by Anderson up in Massachusetts there. And that's when I started working for the company. So somebody gave me an opportunity to do that. That being said, I didn't think I was worthy as anybody. Like I thought there was no part of me. I was blessed to have a job. You know, what I had learned was when you get a felony record, all you can do is sell drugs or work in a warehouse. Those are the two things that you can do. That's it, right? That's anything I ever knew. All my characteristics, all my childhood upbringing, that's what I learned that you could do, right? So when I started with the company, growth was the last thing on my mind, right? It was really unintentional, my growth. It was. In a lot of ways, but I always was working at my best because I was always scared to go backwards because I knew what that meant to me, right? It wasn't the same as a lot of other people that I know. For me, going backwards meant a lot of different negative things. There was no other opportunity. There was no fallback plan or anything like that, right? And so whenever I grew with the company, it was because the opportunity had come up for me to make an impression on the person that I was working for, on Wayne Grimo, because a lot of people were leaving at the time because they were switching everybody to part-time. I asked him what I could do to stay full-time. And he said to me, if you can build a team, you can manage the team. At the time, we were in desperate need of people. He never thought I would do it. So he gave me the opportunity to do that. He had a team a week later. A week later, I had brought in all these different people. I started managing the team. I was terrible at it at first, but I learned on the job by listening to my mentors. We'll go through mentorship in a minute, but the questions that I have for you, if you don't mind filling these out on here. Do you have a plan for personal growth or just a list of activities? Where do you want to be in 5 years or 10 years? Are you on the right trajectory? And where can you see yourself going? Now, answer those questions, what do you think? Because a lot of people look at their 5-year plan, 10-year plan, and they look at it as almost a fake thing. Like it's so far distant that there's no way that they can get to that, right? A lot of people look at that when they look at like a 10-year plan. And I get that. It's not always easy to see yourself going to these places. But what I've learned is that as you start to gear yourself to growth more, and you start to crawl day by day closer to your goal, the vision gets a lot clearer, right? So if I was to ask my buddy 2 years before he opened the restaurant, are you going to open a restaurant in 2 years? Okay. Or 5 years or 10 years, he would have said, hell no, there's nothing I know about that. Why would I ever do that? Right? I don't even think it wasn't even on his mind. Okay. But plans change. The question is, where do you see yourself? Where could you realistically see yourself right now? Right. And the reason why I ask you those questions is because the second law is the law of awareness. If you turn the page, since to reach your potential, you need to know where you want to go and where you currently are. Think of it as the "you are here" markers on a map. You can't figure out the distance and direction of your dreams until you figure out where you are. Okay, so there's three kinds of growth. Okay, that's the thing that we'll go through first. There's three kinds of growth. You'll fit into one of three categories. The first category is people that don't know what they want to do. And the way that you identify one of these people, you identify yourself as being one of these people is, do you often feel confused and do you lack a sense of purpose? If I said to you right now, what's your purpose in life? How many things could you name? What would you say, right? That's how you identify that. People that know where they want to go, but won't do it or don't do it. They're usually frustrated or angry. They focus on the gap, meaning they blame other people. Okay, they blame other people, and they're afraid to change course. They'll oftentimes lash out. They'll leave their job. They'll get angry with the person that they work with or they work for. They'll start to lash out, right? A lot of times people that fit in that category have a really difficult time being happy. And finally, people that know where they want to go and what they'd like to do, and they do it. Those people possess a strong sense of passion. They can focus on their purpose. They're generally fulfilled people that feel confident and good about themselves. So, circumstance, well, before we get that, if you look at the questions directly below that, if you could just fill those questions out, please. The first question is, what do you dislike about yourself and where you are right now? The second is, what do you like about yourself and where you are right now? And these are all meant, by the way, to identify where you're at on that map. What's your you are here marker? Okay. What's the difference between what you want to do and what you're good at? Right. So do you need a pen or something? Okay, cool. What's the difference between what you want to do and what you're good at? Right. So for example, I would love to be a tattoo artist on a bunch of tattoo shops. I'm a terrible artist. There's a big gap there in talent. What drives you and what gives you satisfaction? And that could be different for all different people. Some people would say making money. Other people would say family. Some people would say both. Some people would say friends. Some people would say, doing nothing at all. I just like to play video games. Some people would say other things, right? At one point in time, if you ask me, genuinely, if you ask me at 17 or 18 years old, what I wanted to do with my life, a 17-year-old me would have, and definitely it's not, I would have definitely said, I'll sell drugs, I'll do a lot of drugs, and I'll die very young. Like I had no problem with it whatsoever. Hit realization, I remember when I was taken to, I kind of freaked out. And I was taken to this to the doctor, like a family doctor. And it was my uncle took me there. So this story goes deep, right? So my mother is alcoholic, and I didn't get along with her very much, right? So one day I come home to get my stuff because I'm leaving. I had gone to stay with her for like 6 months. I was largely homeless from the age of like 14 to 18, right around there. I got kicked out of school at 16. So right around 16 years old, I had been staying with my mother for a couple of months. We didn't get along at all. We had sort of gotten into an altercation. She had kind of beat me up a little bit. I had, pushed her off me and whatnot. So I pull into the driveway one day at my mother's house, and my uncle pulls in right behind. I was with a friend and a couple friends, actually. I told my friends, don't get out of the car because my uncle's a crazy guy, So they decided to get out of the car anyways, and he beat a couple of them up. It was kind of funny, actually. I was like, I told you not to get out of the car, So I get in the car with him. He tells me to get in the car. So I get in the car with him. My other uncle shows up. He's a state trooper. They search me. They don't find that I had drugs in my sock. They didn't find that. Obviously, my uncle, who's a cop, didn't do a very good job searching me. Like that's one of the first places I look, right? And then they drove me like 30 miles into nothing. Like I had no idea where I was. I was in the middle of the woods, nowhere, right? And they took me out of the car and they put me down there and they threatened my life like in a very detailed and graphic way. Like I thought I was going to get shot in the head, And then they said he's not worth it, kicked me down and left me there. And I had to find my way back 30 miles. I walked all night, all the next day. Eventually, I got to a town that I recognized. And then I eventually walked home. So it took me a couple days to walk home, and I eventually got home. And whatnot. Thank God for people that were kind of me on the street and stuff like that. But it was a terrible situation. It was a scary situation. But I remember, I'll never forget that situation. I'll never forget what it did for me. I had a messed up family, right? At that time, though, all those things were shaping my character. My thought process was, I mean, I literally thought at that time that I couldn't die. Like there was no, I could get shot in the face and it didn't matter. I could not die. I was in a psychosis, a drug-related psychosis. I mean, it was crazy. So I get taken to the family doctor at some point in there. I don't know exactly where it fits in, but I remember the doctor seeing my arms. There was burns and scars all down my arms. And they thought I was on meth or something like that. And they sent me to a psych ward. And I'll never forget because the doctor who had been my family doctor forever was like, you will be dead very soon. Like I weighed 127 pounds at the time. I was the same height as I am now. I was in rough condition, you know, and I thought I was great. I thought I was in great shape. Well, 127 pounds, I'm doing really well. So, you know what I'm saying? This is great. And I just, oh man, it was so insane to see like, you know, where I was at. I'm not on like antipsychotic medication. There was nothing that stabilized me. Being off of drugs is what stabilized me. You know what I'm saying? And for me, it was a lot of other religious reasons and whatnot I don't want to go into, but that stuff really saved my life. Was finding a circumstance, was creating a circumstance for myself. These two people here, right? They created circumstances for themselves. Well, they came from a lot worse of a situation than me, right? So Madam C.J. Walker, who's heard of her? Raise your hands if you've heard of Madam C.J. Walker before. So we got one. Okay. Annie Malone, I only heard about yesterday, so I was doing a little bit more research on Madam C.J. Walker and found that she had worked for this woman, Annie Malone. Both of them were born as the first people in their families not born into slavery. Okay. Madam C.J. Walker's mother was 5 months pregnant, I think it was with her when they were let out of the plantation and whatnot. Okay. So you think about the circumstances that they were raised in. Terrible condition, right? Terrible condition. Now, Annie Malone, she started making hair care products because she couldn't find anything. There was nothing made at the time for Black women for their hair. And so she started making hair care products for herself, found a good formula, and started going door to door, selling those hair care products with a couple of her friends. Okay. So she started essentially canvassing door to door, right? With a couple of friends. She started to grow her company. Eventually, she met Madam C.J. Walker, who came to work for her. Madam C.J. Walker had been working on her own formula. Her brothers were barbers. She had a severe problem with baldness and a severe issue with dandruff in her hair. So she was looking for something to fix that. And that's when she met Annie Malone. Now they decided they were going to go down south, okay, with a couple dozen women that they knew that worked with them, and that they were going to sell hair care products in the KKK South directly after the Civil War. And they started their companies and they started working door to door in the South back then. You can imagine that circumstance, how difficult that circumstance was, right? Eventually they broke off from each other. There was some business differences that they had there between each other. Madam C.J. Walker created her own formula, went and started her own company, became one of the richest people at the time to ever live. And Annie Malone did the same thing. She moved up to, I believe it was Chicago, bought an entire city block, turned it into a college. And the college was meant to, what she realized was the difficult thing for her in starting in business is that growing up in a slave household full of slaves, that some which could not read, didn't know how to speak well and whatnot, a college for people to learn how to operate in society, in a free society, right? So that's how the college started. Both those two women were two of the first female millionaires in the country, right? Born from terrible circumstances. They built their own character. So when people say that you can't change character, I have a difficult time accepting that. A difficult time accepting that you cannot change character, right? Now, if you look at your sheets here, we're down in creating action and circumstances now. So people who get ahead in the world are the ones who look for circumstances they want, and if they can't find them, then they make them, okay? What circumstances do you need right now, need to have or need to create to succeed? And then the second thing I want to point out is what can you do, or ask is what can you do every day that will make you another step closer towards your goal? So for example, it could be something as simple as, you know, I want to be able to spend more time playing with my kids without getting tired, right? So to do that, well, I can go to the gym every day, or even I don't even need to do that, right? I have access to the world. I can go for a walk every day. I can put aside some work every day, spend an extra half hour every day just with my family, right? There's numerous things I could do. If that's number one on my goal list, and that's what I'll do. If I want to start my own business, then I'll make sure that I make a different connection every week with somebody, right? What can you do every day to make your circumstances better? So if you could fill out those 2 questions, that would be great. And layers of accountability move you closer to your goal. The closer that you get, the better it feels, and the more you can see yourself succeeding. So that whole 5 or 10-year plan, I want you to think for a second. If you're mad on C.J. Walker, in 1867, you're born. 20 years later, it's 1887, right? 1887, you're 20 years old. What's your 10-year plan look like? As a Black woman in 1887, right? What's your 10-year plan look like? You think that she could see her 10-year plan? No, definitely not, right? I mean, that's 100% self-made. Okay, at the time, she was concerned about getting the dandruff out of her hair. That was her concern at the time, right? But she built that into a giant business that still exists today. Okay, same thing for Annie Malone. When she was born, 20 years later in 1897, what was her 10-year plan? So we make these 10-year plans, right? And I say, if they can do what they did, and under those circumstances, then yeah, I can build, a rocket ship in 10 years. I mean, I don't want to do that. I'm just giving an example. That would be weird. It'd be a big drastic change in my life to start building rocket ships. But I can build a castle if I want to. Whatever you want to do, if their circumstances are what they were, okay, pretty much any goal that any of us have, we can achieve. So the image should start to get a little bit clearer to you. Is okay, if this is my goal, and I can take these baby steps there, okay, maybe sometimes drastic steps, depending on where you're at. I can start to see those pieces kind of fit together, right? All right, now the last thing I want to go over before we finish is finding a mentor. So I've always benefited from having a mentor since I started with this company, okay? Now, I already sort of told the story of how I started with the company and Wayne being my mentor and whatnot. So I want to tell you guys a story about a book that I read years ago. And I can't for the life of me, some of you guys might know the book when I describe it, but it was about this kid who was in a juvenile facility, true story, a juvenile facility. And there was this landscaper, that guy who owned a landscaping company that would come into the facility every so often. He would talk to all the people in the facility and try to help them out, right? So his job was to go in and just kind of mentor some of the kids there at the facility. And so he begins to mentor this student, we'll call him again Jeremy. And he begins to mentor Jeremy. And Jeremy eventually gets out of that facility when he turns 19. I think he had robbed a bank or robbed a store or something like that. And he goes to live with this mentor. Okay, so Jeremy starts working landscaping for him. And he really enjoys it. He starts to feel better about himself. He gets himself into shape, whatever. He finds out that his mentor had made some bad investments and they had lost a lot of money in the stock market or whatever, I think around 2008 and whatnot. Again, true story. And was about to lose his company. And the mentor was on the verge of suicide, but was afraid to say anything to the person that he had been mentoring for a number of years because he was in such a negative place. He didn't want that person to feel that, right? And so the mentor, he started becoming the mentor for their mentor, right? And the relationship changed. A couple of years ago, the guy Wayne who hired me, his wife passed away from cancer. And it was a long, long battle with cancer too. She had successfully fought that battle, and we thought everything was good. And about a year, 2 years went by, and everything seemed fine and great. And then all of a sudden, the cancer came back aggressively, and because of COVID, she couldn't get into the proper hospital appointments and whatnot in time, and she ended up losing her life July a year and a half ago, right? And he's not a religious person. He's not a believer in God. So he had an especially hard time with it. It was like, it was finality there, for him. And he was afraid, and it was genuine fear. And he'd call me at 1, 2 o'clock in the morning, sometimes every night. And I hated it. I was like, man, I can't, there's only so much I can do here. Right. I got kids, I got a job. I can't do this every single night. But, you find the time to work with somebody in a situation like that. And I know that was important to him, and it was important to me to be able to do that for him. And so I think the definition of mentor, a lot of people have this idea that it's just a friend, right? It's just someone that you're there for. I use the example of my friend Dennis. He calls me all the time for stuff, right? He needs help with this, he needs help with that. He's gone through some tough times. So he calls me all the time about stuff. But if he ever called me and asked me to be his mentor, I would say, hell no. There's no way I'm going to be a mentor. I'm good on that. Thanks. But I'm too close to him, right? I'm too close to him. I can't be honest enough with him to be his mentor, right? So when you're searching for a mentor, you could real quick, one thing that's always been important to me is growing the right temperament. For me personally, it's been a struggle, okay? So if you could circle the things that you feel like you might need a mentor for eventually, on your sheet. Circle the things that you feel like you could have help with, like somebody could help you. Developing strengths, growing temperament, building a track record, finding passions, making choices, offering advice, developing a game plan. Now, have you ever had mentors in your life? If you could write down real quick for you who those people are. And if you don't have a mentor, who do you think could become your mentor? Do you have any ideas? And it doesn't need to be a specific person. It could be a profile of a person. Who do you think? What do you think you need from a mentor? What are you looking for in a mentor? And what I'd urge you to do is, if you look at what we've gone through so far, I'll start with that one because it's not up here. If you could, the first thing I would do is when I leave this room today, and most people won't do this or whatever, I'm not stupid, I get that. But if you have a profile for a mentor and you feel like you don't have someone there to lean on about specific things and to be honest with you and whatnot, find one. I urge you to find one. Find a mentor. That's the first takeaway to get. A couple other things. Are you happy where you're at? And what can you do to change that experience, right? So I like to get personal with these things. I'll tell you that right when I got married back in 2014, right when I got married. Okay.
You done?
I'm about to be.
Okay.
Yep, like 2 minutes. Okay, cool. We get started a little bit later. So, right when I got married, I made some mistakes in my marriage almost right away. Right, my wife and I were fighting a lot. I had this idea in my head that I was too young to be married, that I did not need that relationship or whatever. I was scared because I was having I had adopted my first daughter. I was having my second daughter, but it was the first one that I had. When I had a daughter that passed away back in 2007, right after birth. That was I'm not to run through the whole scenario, but she was born very sick. And so it was just a hard time in my life. And my reaction was to change my experience, but in a terrible way. Right? In a terrible way, in a drastically bad way. Okay. My wife, luckily, she's a stronger person than I am, because I definitely wouldn't have stayed with her if she did what I did. She stayed with me. She stayed with me through it. She supported me through don't get me wrong. There was a lot of fights and stuff like that. I mean, you can't make those decisions. I was going out all the time, doing stupid stuff, getting drunk all the time, not focusing on my sobriety and making decisions, that you'd assume a guy would make in a situation like that. She stuck with me through that. And I've learned, I think, from that more than anything, is that there's multiple ways to change your experience, right? So not that we don't have marriage trouble now, but I don't hold on to grudges, for example. Neither one of us do. So if we have a fight today, this morning, it's done by the evening. We recognize the importance of a finality when it comes to stuff like that, right? You don't want to go to bed upset. You don't want to go to bed angry. There's no purpose in it. It's not going to help out. If you feel like you have to go to bed with a grudge, it's how our mentality is, then you shouldn't be in that relationship, right? We now have people that we can talk to that are productive in life if we're struggling with each other, right? Mentors and people like that in our church. And so we have a different process now to change our experiences. And so when I say, are you happy where you're at? How can you change that experience? Be tactful in what you do and the way that you change the experience. Develop more initiatives to enact change. So I use my calendar on my iPhone as an example. I didn't know a calendar existed on an iPhone until 6 months ago. I've had an iPhone since I was fucking 20. I don't know. I mean, for 12 years I've had an iPhone, and I didn't know it had a calendar on it until 6 months ago. I had no idea. I get these alerts all the time from different people about meetings and shit, and I'd be like, I didn't put that in my phone. What the hell's that? I'm not going to that meeting. That's not mine, right? And someone texted me about it. It was a process. But that's a good example. Now I have that in front of me to make sure that I don't fail. Pray to change your circumstances and develop your character. People can change. People's character can change for the positive or negative, right? We all know people, right? I mean, I think that we all agree probably to an extent that people can change in ways. So try to make some positive change in your life. So I'm sorry I was a little bit jumpy. I was a little bit rushed in parts, but I appreciate your time. And does anybody have any questions for me? All right. Sounds like we better get out there then. Thank you guys very much.